Morning, church family. Glad to be with you in our daily Bible studies. Got a question for you this morning. How many of you remember all the way back to 2011? That's hard to do sometimes. There was something big event here in town in February 2011. You may remember it was Super Bowl 45. And it was a big deal because Jerry Jones was wanting to show off his big new castle over there at Cowboy Stadium. You remember what happened in February 2011 at Super Bowl time? This great ice storm hit Dallas, and it just about shut everything down. It was pretty embarrassing for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, and they were wanting to show off the new stadium and hosting the Super Bowl. It was a big deal, and it kind of got crazy. There's a joke that got out about that time about Tom Landry being in heaven, and he and God walking around and kind of looking down on Jerry Jones and all his shenanigans around the Super Bowl, and they're looking down from heaven, and they see the stadium down there. And Landry looks over to God and says, "You know, it'd really be funny, some ice." I love that. Our best made plan. Somebody says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I love that. Life is pretty uncertain. It's pretty uncertain. And sometimes that's not funny because the things that happen to us are pretty tough. None of us predicted this COVID-19 thing. Nobody wrote the book on that. We don't even know how long it's going to last. Even now, we have great optimism because of the vaccine. But I'm tired of the COVID-19 crisis. Jeff, in one of his sermons a couple of weeks ago, used the term weary. And that's a good term. I get weary about this. I get tired about this. Life is uncertain. We don't get to choose what happens to us in this life. For this next week, these next 5 days, I'm going to spend some time with you in the Psalms. I find myself in the Psalms quite a bit because they're written by folks like you and me, and in all kinds of places and all kinds of circumstances. There are people in the Psalms who are fearful. There are people in the Psalms who are angry. Some that are betrayed by family and friends. Some of them have great victory. Some of them on mountaintops, when others in the valley and defeat. In just about any situation that I find myself in this life, I can find the psalm that speaks to that. And I think that's why God put those there, to speak to us in all kinds of situations. Today we're going to look at Psalm 46. There are a few verses that are familiar to us out of this psalm, but this whole psalm speaks to us, including me, when we find ourselves. Let's read Psalm 46 together. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, though the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam, the mountains quake from their surging. There's a river whose stream makes glad the city of God. I love that verse. The holy place where God dwells. God is within her and she will not fail. God will help her at daybreak. Nations are in an uproar. Kingdoms fall. His voice lifts. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." God is our refuge, our help in times of trouble. That word trouble there in the original language means squeezed, bound up, maybe backed into a corner where you're pressed on from all sides. You ever feel that way? I do. The writer here uses two different analogies to describe what that feels like, what that is. One is natural disasters, earthquakes, mountains trembling, waters and oceans roaring. Well, if you look back over the last couple of years, people in this country and all over the world have experienced that. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods. It seems to be increasing. Seems like this year more than ever. The other analogy he uses in verse 6 is that nations rage and kingdoms totter. Political stresses, political pressures, political hardships, national unrest. I have never seen our country as divided as it is right now. Some who grew up earlier than me, maybe around the World War I or II, and maybe the Civil Rights Movement. But right now we're a divided country. And in both of these literal situations, God speaks and has benefit to both of those circumstances. In his sermon to the country, to the American people on 9/11, Billy Graham said this after the 9/11 terrorist attack. Why did God allow this to happen? I don't know. But I accept by faith that God is a God of mercy and compassion, even in times of suffering and darkness. I like that. What if these are just metaphors, though? What if these descriptors of mountains and earthquakes and oceans roaring or nations toppling, what if they're not literal? What if they're just a metaphor for what's happening in my life personally? Relationships, fears, anger, hurt, uncertainty, grief. What if the storms mentioned are personal storms within my soul? Or what if the unrest mentioned is spiritual unrest in my soul? Whatever is true in your life, whatever is true in my life, the answer is the same. God needs to be our refuge, the place we go to hide. God needs to be our strength. He says a very present help in trouble, right here and now. My prayer often for people as I'm trying to serve them is that the love of God will be real for them. It will be present to them. Billy Graham's sermon on 9/11 speaks to me individually and as a nation. When I'm in trouble myself, as Billy Graham said, I must accept by faith that God is a God of mercy and compassion, even in times of my suffering and even in times of my darkness. It's interesting when you study the Psalms and you look at the background of what caused them to be written. Many believe that this Psalm 46 was written on the occasion that we find in 2 Kings 18 and 19. I invite you to read those two chapters today, chapter 18 and 19 of 2 Kings. It's the story of Hezekiah, the king of Judah. He was one of the great kings, one who loved and followed the Lord. Listen to what it says about him in 2 Kings 18. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places and smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, but for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands of the Lord that God had given to Moses. And the Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he did. He's one of the great kings. But later in the chapter, there's a king of Assyria named Sennacherib. He comes and he bullies his way around Israel and Judah. And he even takes the 10 northern tribes into Assyrian captivity because the 10 northern tribes and the 10 northern tribes' king had been disobedient to God. Then he sets his sights on Judah and he sets his sights on King Hezekiah. And Hezekiah initially tries to make peace with him, but it doesn't work. And Sennacherib takes siege or takes hold of Jerusalem and puts it under siege and prepares to take them captive. One of the big lessons out of all this as I studied that this weekend is that trouble comes for everybody. Even this King Hezekiah, who was the most faithful, they said nobody before him or after him was as faithful and obedient and humble to God as Hezekiah was, but yet trouble came to him. Even this king who was faithful to God and did what was right, he led Judah into repentance and obedience, still had trouble that comes into his life. We know that in our Sunday school classes, but when it happens to me in my own life, in my own valleys of despair, sometimes I forget that. I think I'm the only one. Why is this happening to me? We might even ask, why is God doing this to me? When in fact, trouble comes on us all at some point. No one's exempt. But when trouble comes, my part in all this is to remember God, stay faithful to him, and trust and wait. 2 Kings 19, verse 6 and 7, God sends Isaiah the prophet to minister to Hezekiah by telling him what's true. This is what it says. This is what the Lord says. This is Isaiah talking to Hezekiah. Do not be afraid of what you have heard, those words with which the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Listen, when he hears a certain report, I will make him want to return to his own country, and there I will have him cut down with the sword. When trouble comes, God often sends prophets to us to remind us of what's real and what's not. Think about all those people who have come to your side when you're in a valley. Friends, family, maybe a minister, maybe an elder, reminding you of Scripture, reminding you of God's promises, reminding you through their own testimony of how God has helped them in their troubles. God provides people like he provided Isaiah to come to Hezekiah's defense And now Hezekiah's 8, and I'm so glad that he does. Sometimes I'm the prophet, but sometimes I'm the one who receives the prophet, who receives the edification from somebody that God sends. It's all part of God's provision, and I love that. But Sennacherib still pursues. He still has his sights on Jerusalem. He's still trying to take siege. And then watch what Hezekiah does in response. 2 Kings 19, verse 14. Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread out before the Lord on the floor. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to the words of Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. It is true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste these nations around us. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone fashioned by human hands. Now, Lord, our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are God. What a prayer. Hezekiah, in his distress, goes up to the temple and he worships. He lays prostrate before the Lord and he prays. Sometimes when I'm in my valley, the last place I want to be is in the temple. The last place I want to be is at church. But I tell you, you need to run to God's people. You need to run before God and worship and prayer. I love verse 19. Hezekiah wants God to intervene on their behalf because it will be a testimony to God. It will be a testimony to God's power and God's provision. He says, God, I want you to be lifted up in this. Not me, not Israel, not Judah. I want you to be lifted up. Hezekiah wants to raise God's name up around the country. Hezekiah wants these troubles he is experiencing to be an opportunity for others to know this living God. That's what I need to do as well when I'm in the valley. I listen to God's word. Scripture through the word of God, or maybe a word brought to somebody who God sends to me, those prophets that God sends. I need to be in worship. I need to be in prayer for help. I need to find ways to lift up God's name in my trouble. My troubles become a platform or stage to show the world who God is. And listen to the way the story ends in 2 Kings 19. God does exactly what he said he would do. That night he sends an angel into the camp of the Assyrian army, and 185,000 soldiers are slain by this angel that night. Sennacherib gets his attention and his army, and they turn around and run back to Assyria. And just like God through Isaiah prophesied, Sennacherib is in his temple praying to a false god, and his own sons come in and kill him with the sword that night. So for us today, this Psalm 46, written on the occasion of these events in 2 Kings 18 and 19, they're there to help us when we're stressed, when we find ourselves pressed, and when we find ourselves in despair, when we're in doubt and when we're in trouble. Now let's read this psalm again, looking back through this lens of 2 Kings 18 and 19. God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble, right here and now. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake at their surging. Think about this Assyrian army surrounding and sieging Jerusalem there. There is a river whose stream makes glad the city of God. You know anything about Hezekiah and Hezekiah's tunnel and how they got water into the city of Jerusalem? Water symbolizing the presence of God. There is a river whose stream makes glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is with her, she will not fail. God will help her at daybreak. Nations are in an uproar, kingdoms are falling. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Does that make sense as you read Psalm 46 in light of 2 Kings 18 and 19? It's beautiful how these two sections of scriptures fit together. When I'm in trouble, remember God. Listen to his word. Listen to those that God sends to minister to me. Worship. Stay in touch with God. Pray. Be still. Be quiet. That's so hard to do. Trust in His promises. Wait for God to reveal His plans. Waiting is hard for me. And in all this, my motive, my aim is to lift up God and praise Him and bring attention to Him in my troubles. Be still, know that I am God, and allow my circumstances to bring glory and honor to God in all that I do. God bless you in your study today.